I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a multi-million-dollar startup or a flashy lifestyle like the ones you see online. In reality, not long ago, I was working long hours every single day, but my income wasn't growing the same way. And I started to realize something that was honestly hard to accept. Maybe the problem wasn't that I wasn't working hard enough. Maybe I was just playing the wrong game. In today's world, where the cost of living in the U.S. keeps rising, global competition is getting more intense, and almost everyone is willing to work 10 to 12 hours a day. Being hardworking is no longer an advantage. Over the past 6 months, I've tried changing the way I work, applying a few principles that I used to ignore, and the results made me completely rethink how making money actually works. This video is everything I've learned from that experience. What surprised me the most is this. None of these ideas are complicated. They're actually very simple, so simple that most people ignore them. In this video, I'm going to share the 3 biggest things I learned. Why working more hours doesn't necessarily make you more money. What actually drives higher income and why most people miss it. And most importantly, how you can apply this to your own situation, no matter what you do. If you've ever felt like you're putting in a lot of effort but not seeing real results, there's a good chance you'll see yourself somewhere in this story. Let me say something that might sound uncomfortable at first. Working more hours does not make you rich, and trying harder does not guarantee better results. I used to believe the exact opposite. For a long time, my strategy was simple. Work more, push harder, stay busy. I thought if I just put in enough hours, things would eventually click. And to be fair, I was working hard. There were weeks I clocked 60, sometimes even 70 hours. But my income didn't double. It didn't even grow proportionally. If anything, it stayed flat. And I started noticing something strange, not just in my own life, but in the people around me. I had a friend working in retail here in the U.S. He was doing 10, 12-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week. That's easily 60 plus hours. At $18 an hour, that's roughly $4,000 a month before taxes. Now compare that to someone I know who runs a small online business. He doesn't work 12 hours a day. In fact, most days he works maybe 5, 6 focused hours. But his systems, email automation, ads, and a small team generate over $20,000 a month. Same country, same economy, same 24 hours in a day. Completely different results. Let me ask you this, be honest. Are you currently trading your time for money, or are you building something that can make money without you? Drop a comment below. I'd actually love to see where you're at. So what's the difference? It's not effort. It's not discipline. It's how the work is structured. Let me give you another example that hit me personally. At one point, I was doing freelance work, taking on projects, getting paid per task. And I thought I was doing well because I was always busy. My calendar was full. I had no free time. But when I actually broke down the numbers, I realized something. If I stopped working, I stopped earning instantly. No work equals no income. That's when it clicked for me. I wasn't building anything. I was just renting out my time. Now compare that to a business owner, even a small one. Let's say they create a product once, or they set up a system once. After that, the same work can generate income over and over again. One sale becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, not because they're working more hours, but because the output is no longer tied directly to their time. And this is happening everywhere right now. Think about content creators on YouTube. Someone spends 10 hours making one video. That video can generate views and income for months, even years. Compare that to someone working 10 hours at a job. Once the shift ends, the value stops. Or take Uber drivers versus someone who owns a fleet of cars. The driver makes money per ride. The owner makes money from every ride, even the ones they didn't personally drive. Same industry, different model. According to recent data, the average full-time worker in the U.S. earns around $60,000 a year. That's with consistent effort, often 40, 50 hours a week. But small business owners, even at a modest level, can scale beyond that, not because they work twice as hard, but because their work creates leverage. And yet, most of us are still stuck in the same mindset. If I just work harder, things will improve. But look around. There are people working 1-2 hour days who are still financially stressed. And there are people working fewer hours who are building real wealth. So clearly, effort alone is not the deciding factor. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can work extremely hard at the wrong thing and stay stuck for years. You can try your best and still not move forward, because effort by itself is neutral. It only matters what that effort is applied to and how it multiplies. This is the part no one really talks about. We've been taught to value hard work, to stay busy, to push through, but nobody teaches us to question whether the work we're doing is actually worth the time we're putting into it. And once I started questioning that, really questioning it, everything began to change. Because if working more isn't the answer, then the real question becomes, what actually is? And in the next few minutes, you'll understand something that took many people years to learn. So if working more hours isn't the answer, then what actually is? This is where things started to shift for me. Not overnight, not in some dramatic breakthrough moment, but gradually, through small realizations that kept stacking on top of each other until I couldn't ignore them anymore. I began to notice that the problem wasn't how much I was working, it was how much I was getting out of the work I was doing. That's when I came across this idea that changed everything for me. Leverage. At first, I thought leverage was something complicated, something related to finance or investing, something only wealthy people understood. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's actually very simple. Leverage is the difference between what you put in and what you get out. If you spend 1 hour and make $20, that's one level. If you spend 1 hour and make $200, that's a completely different level. Same time, same effort, completely different outcome. Once I understood that, I started seeing it everywhere in my life. The first place I saw it clearly was in my own skills. When I first started doing freelance work, I was making around $10 to $15 an hour. I would spend 4 or 5 hours completing a task, and I thought that was normal. I thought the only way to make more was to take on more work. But after a few months, I improved. Not dramatically, just small things. I got better at communicating with clients. I understood what they actually wanted, and I stopped overthinking simple tasks. Suddenly, I could do the same job in 2 hours instead of 5, and I could charge $50 to $100 for it. Nothing about my situation changed on the surface. Same laptop, same environment, same amount of time available in a day. But the output changed because my skill improved. Then I started noticing how tools could completely change the equation. I used to do everything manually. I would reply to emails one by one, track everything in my head, and repeat the same tasks over and over again. It felt like I was always busy, always doing something, but never really moving forward. When I started using basic tools like email automation, scheduling systems, and simple templates, things shifted quickly. Tasks that used to take me 3 hours suddenly took 30 minutes. Not because I was working harder, but because I stopped doing things the slow way. That was the first time I experienced what it feels like to get more out of the same effort. But the biggest change came when I started thinking in terms of systems. Instead of doing things one by one, I started asking myself if there was a way to do something once and have it keep working. For example, when I started creating content, I used to treat it like a one-time effort. I would make one post, get a few views, and move on. But then I changed the way I approached it. I focused on one idea, broke it down into multiple pieces, and reused it across different platforms. One piece of work started generating multiple results. Instead of one output, I got 5 or 10. And some of that content kept bringing in views and opportunities days or even weeks later without me doing anything new. That was a completely different experience from trading time for money. And then I started seeing the highest level of leverage, which is people. I'm not fully there yet myself, but I've seen it happen around me. I have a friend who used to run his business alone. He was doing everything himself and making around $6,000 a month, working constantly. Then he hired one person to help with operations. Within a few months, his revenue doubled, not because he suddenly worked twice as hard, but because he wasn't the bottleneck anymore. He created space for growth. When you step back and look at all of this, you start to see a pattern. Output is not just about how much you do, it's about how much each action produces. The way I think about it now is simple. Output equals volume times leverage. Most people focus only on volume. They try to work more hours, do more tasks, stay busy all the time. But volume has a limit. You only have 24 hours in a day. Leverage is what changes the game. Imagine two people. One works 10 hours a day doing everything manually, generating $10 of value per hour. At the end of the day, they make $100. The other works 5 hours a day but uses better tools, has better skills, and operates with a simple system that generates $50 per hour. They make $250 in half the time. That difference is not talent, it's not luck, it's leverage. You can see this pattern in the real world at every level. Someone like Warren Buffett doesn't spend his time working hourly for money. Through ownership, which is a form of leverage, he earns from businesses without being involved in the daily operations. Someone like Elon Musk doesn't rely on his personal time alone. His leverage comes from teams, technology, and systems that scale far beyond what one person can do. When I started applying this idea in my own life, I didn't suddenly become successful, but something important changed. My time started to feel different. Instead of asking what I should do next, I started asking whether this was the best use of my time. That question forced me to slow down and think. I stopped doing things that didn't scale. I focused more on things that could grow over time. I paid more attention to improving what I was already doing instead of constantly looking for something new. Small changes started to compound. Writing one better email instead of 10 average ones. Building one simple system instead of repeating the same task every day. Spending time improving a skill instead of jumping between different things. The biggest realization for me was this: I don't need more time, I need more leverage. Because at the end of the day, two people can work equally hard, put in the same number of hours, and still end up in completely different places. The difference is not how much they work, it's how much their work produces. And once you see that clearly, you stop chasing more work and start building something that actually works for you. So once I understood this idea of leverage, everything started to make more sense. But at the same time, it also raised a different question. If leverage is the key, then why aren't more people using it? Why do so many of us still feel stuck, even when we know we should be doing things differently? because here's the truth. I had to face myself. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do. It was that I kept getting distracted from doing it. And this is where things get a little uncomfortable, because the biggest thing holding me back wasn't lack of opportunity. It was actually chasing too many of them. In the next part, I want to show you something I personally struggled with for a long time, and I see it happening everywhere around me. It's the reason why people keep starting over, why they jump from one idea to another, and why, even with good intentions, they never build enough momentum to actually win. If you've ever felt like you're doing a lot, but not getting anywhere, this next part might hit closer than you expect. This is the part I wish someone had told me earlier, not in a motivational way, but in a very direct, almost uncomfortable way. Because if I'm being honest, the biggest reason I stayed stuck wasn't lack of effort. It was the way I kept making the same mistakes over and over again, just in different forms. The first mistake was constantly switching directions. There was a period where I changed what I was doing every few months. I would start something, feel excited, put in effort for maybe 4 to 8 weeks, and then the results wouldn't come fast enough. Or I would see someone else doing something that looked more promising, and I'd think, maybe that's the better path. So I switched. I did this with freelance work, with content, with small online projects. If I look back, in 1 year alone, I probably tried 5 or 6 different directions, and none of them failed because they were bad ideas. They failed because I didn't stay long enough. If you think about the math, it becomes very clear. Let's say something realistically takes 6 months of consistent effort to start producing meaningful results. If you quit after 2 months, you're always operating at 30% of the timeline needed to see success. So even if the opportunity is good, you never reach the point where it pays off. And I wasn't the only one doing this. I had a friend who jumped between jobs almost every year. Better title, slightly higher pay, new environment. On paper, it looked like progress. But after 5 years, his income went from about $45,000 to maybe $65,000. That's growth, but it's not life-changing. Meanwhile, another person I know stayed in one field, built deep expertise, and after 5 years went from $50,000 to over $120,000. Same time frame, completely different outcome. The difference wasn't intelligence or effort. It was consistency. The second mistake was trying to do too many things at once. At one point, I convinced myself that I was being strategic by diversifying. I had freelance clients. I was trying to grow a social media account. I was exploring a small business idea, and I even considered learning a completely new skill on the side. On paper, it felt productive. I was busy all the time. But in reality, I was spreading myself so thin that nothing moved forward. I remember 1 week very clearly. I tracked my time and realized I was switching between tasks almost every hour. A bit of client work, then content, then research, then back to something else. At the end of that week, I had worked close to 50 hours. But if I'm honest, I didn't complete anything meaningful. No real progress. No real output. That's when it hit me. Being busy is not the same as being effective. When you divide your attention across 5 different directions, each one only gets a fraction of your energy, and none of them get enough to actually grow. It's like trying to build 5 fires at the same time with limited wood. Each one stays small. None of them become strong enough to sustain themselves. The third mistake, and this one is the most dangerous, is constantly chasing new opportunities. This one feels good in the moment. It feels exciting. It feels like progress. You see someone making money in a new space. Drop shipping, content, AI tools, trading, whatever is trending at the time. and you think, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the faster path. I fell into this trap more times than I want to admit. Every time I saw something new, I felt this urge to jump in. I would tell myself I'm just exploring, just keeping options open. But in reality, I was avoiding the harder path, which was sticking with one thing long enough to make it work. I had a friend who did the same thing, but on a bigger scale. Over 2 years, he started multiple small businesses. Each one had potential. Each one made a little bit of money, maybe $500 here, $1,000 there, but he never committed to any of them fully. At one point, I asked him a simple question. If you had to shut down everything except one of these, which one would you keep? He answered immediately. And then I asked him, why aren't you focusing on that one? He didn't really have a clear answer. That conversation stayed with me because I realized I was doing the same thing, just at a smaller scale. We like to believe that having more options is a strength, but in reality, too many options can keep you stuck. Every new opportunity comes with a hidden cost. It takes your time, your attention, and your focus away from the thing that could actually grow. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like you're being proactive. It feels like you're staying open-minded. But over time, it adds up. You keep resetting your progress. You keep going back to zero. And years can pass without real growth. If I had to summarize all of this in one sentence, it would be this. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong opportunity. They fail because they never stay with one long enough. And I'm saying this as someone who learned it the hard way. Because the truth is, almost any decent opportunity can work if you give it enough time, focus, and consistency. But if you keep jumping, splitting your attention, and chasing what's new, you never give yourself the chance to find out. And that's the mistake you want to avoid. So after going through all of that, I had to stop and ask myself a very simple question. If I already knew what wasn't working, why was I still doing it? Because the truth is, avoiding these mistakes is not just about understanding them, it's about changing how you actually operate day to day. And that's the part most people skip. It's easy to agree with everything we just talked about. It's much harder to sit down, look at your current situation, and make the uncomfortable changes that actually move you forward. So in the final part of this video, I want to show you what I started doing differently. Not theory, not something complicated, just a simple shift in how I approached my work that began to change my results over time. And more importantly, something you can start applying immediately without needing more time, more money, or a completely new opportunity. Because if you've made it this far, you don't need more information. You need something you can actually use. So after going through all of this, I had to simplify everything down to something I could actually follow. Not 10 steps, not a complicated strategy, just 3 things. The first one is this: choose one thing. And I don't mean to choose the perfect thing. That's another trap. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best opportunity, the fastest path, the smartest move. But the truth is, most decent opportunities can work. What matters more is whether you commit to it. At one point, I had multiple things going on. Some were making a bit of money, some had potential, some were just ideas, but none of them were growing in a meaningful way. So I made a decision that felt uncomfortable at the time. I picked one thing and deliberately ignored the rest. Not because the others were bad, but because I knew I didn't have the focus to grow all of them. And I won't lie to you, this part is hard. Because when you choose one thing, you also have to say no to everything else. And some of those no's feel expensive. You might walk away from short-term money. You might miss out on something that looks exciting, but if you don't make that decision, you pay a different price. You stay scattered, you stay inconsistent, and over time, that costs you far more. The second thing is this: stay with it longer than you want to. This was probably the hardest lesson for me. There will be a point where things feel slow, where the results don't match the effort, where you start questioning whether you made the right choice. That's the moment most people quit. But what I've realized is that this phase is part of the process. Almost everything meaningful takes longer than you expect. If something realistically needs 6 to 12 months of consistent effort to grow, and you quit after 2 or 3 months, you're not failing because it doesn't work. You're failing because you didn't stay long enough, and there's a real cost to that. Every time you quit and start over, you don't just lose time, you lose momentum. You lose the compounding effect of your previous effort. If you repeat that pattern for years, the loss is massive. Not just financially, but in terms of where you could have been. The third thing is this: focus on making what you already do better. Not new, better. This is where leverage really starts to show up. Instead of asking, what else can I do? I started asking, how can I improve what I'm already doing? How can I get better at this skill? How can I make this process faster? How can I turn this into something that works without me every time? These are not exciting questions. They don't give you that rush of starting something new. They don't feel like a big move, but they work. Small improvements start to stack. A better message leads to better responses. A better system saves time. A better approach brings in more results from the same effort. And over time, those small improvements compound in a way that completely changes your situation. But here's the warning: this path is not flashy. It's not fast in the beginning, and it requires you to do things that feel repetitive and sometimes boring. That's why most people avoid it. They go back to chasing something new, something exciting, something that feels like progress. And that's exactly how they stay stuck. If you take anything from this video, let it be this: you don't need a completely different plan. You don't need another opportunity. You need to commit to one direction, stay with it long enough to see results, and keep improving it over time. Because at the end of the day, the difference is not in how many opportunities you find. It's in what you do with the one you already have. You don't need more opportunities. You need to make better use of the one you already have. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this: working harder is not the answer. For a long time, I believed that more hours, more effort, and staying busy would eventually lead to better results. But in reality, that approach kept me stuck. What actually changed things was understanding leverage, how to get more out of the same time and effort. And once I saw that, everything became clearer. The people who move forward aren't necessarily working more, they're working differently. They focus on one thing, they stay with it long enough, and they keep improving it instead of constantly starting over. Because the biggest mistake isn't choosing the wrong path. It's never staying on one long enough to make it work. So before you look for something new, take a step back and look at what you already have. Chances are the opportunity you're looking for is already in front of you. You just haven't fully committed to it yet. Thank you for watching.